Welcome to another live edition. I am so excited to have you all join me today. I know I've been late, sorry for that. And someone already checked up to see where I was. That made me feel so good, so wanted, so special. So thank you for letting me know that you're patiently waiting for me to go on a live. Today is going to be a very I think interactive type of live. I hope we're able to get feedback. I hope that you're going to be able to comment on whatever it is that we're going to be discussing today, because your comments are actually very we learn from your comments. You know, we have a group of very smart individuals on this platform. Every time I post a question and I read the responses and I say, wow, that's brilliant. So we have a bunch of very intelligent group of people. So I would love for you to post your comments as I go over today's topic. And I will try to get to as many responses as possible. Today is a very beneficial live for those who are married, for those who are engaged, for those who are looking to get married, because we're going to discuss a very important aspect of how do we stay married. It's easy to get married. You can go on dates, you can click with someone, and then you say, will you marry me? And you tie the knot, and there you go. The wedding is done. But how does a couple actually stay married for many years? And you can be married for 20, 25, 30, 35, 40 plus years and still have challenges in your marriage if you don't work on certain aspects of the marriage. Meaning, you're never exactly going to know what a perfect marriage is all about, because marriages have ups and downs. There are going to be good days. There are going to be bad days. There are going to be days where you wish, like, I wish I never married my spouse. Like, what was I thinking? How did I get fooled into this? So those days are also going to come, but we quickly get those thoughts out and say, wait a minute. Having a bad day doesn't mean my marriage is bad. Having an argument doesn't mean that it's all over. We're going to fix this up and try to see how we can prevent it from happening in the future. So I'm going to be going over a chapter in this book called 10 Minutes a Day to a Better Marriage. It's written by a therapist. And it says, getting your spouse to understand you. The topic that we're going to be learning from this book is about, can you guess? Communication. I posted the poll with the question, why do marriages fail? And overwhelmingly, we got the answer of, because there is a lack of communication. And I really think that that is a very important aspect of marriage. And there are different things about communication that we have to know. How do we communicate? What do we say to each other? Because if we don't communicate, we actually start distancing apart. And if we don't communicate, we get frustrated because we forget that our husband or our wife does not have the same mentality or thinking processes like we do. But before we get into communication, what are the ways of communication? We're going to talk about 4 different ways of communicating. I think also, it wasn't a part of the choices on the poll, what is the reason marriages fail? Besides communication, I would say, because we don't spend time with each other. We don't give each other time. We became a society where everything is so fast-paced, where we're always on our electronic devices, where we stopped living together as a couple. We almost become like roommates. And again, that too is under the umbrella of communication, but you can communicate with a roommate too. It's what kind of time are we spending with each other? Are we going out on dates? Because when you were dating each other, what were you doing? You were spending time by going out on dates, by having this one-on-one interaction, by looking into each other's eyes, by bringing flowers, by giving a gift, and all that made your relationship very exciting. So are we still doing that many years later, or does that spending time with each other just go dissolve because now we're so busy with taking care of the children, going to work, paying the bills, cooking, cleaning, that all of a sudden we forget what brought us together in the first place. What brought us together in the first place was talking to each other, spending time with each other, looking good for one another, right? Like when you went on dates before, it wasn't just like, oh, let me put on my sweatpants and a t-shirt and just have like, my hair all over the place, or let me just have a beard that just grew out and I didn't shave for like 6 days. No, you made sure you put on nice perfume and cologne, you shaved yourself if you're a man, you did your hair nicely, you put on nice shoes, you got dressed, and all that spiced up your your dating session. All that made you attracted to each other. But if you get married and you all of a sudden forget to take care of each other for each other, and the only time you get nice and pretty is for when you're going out to a party, to an event, to work, to a meeting, the message you're sending your spouse is almost like, you're not worthy enough for me to look good for you. You love me anyways, just the way I am. So I don't have to go that extra mile to put effort in attracting myself for you. And yes, of course, our spouse has to love us for the way we are. But if we neglect ourselves and we don't take care of ourselves, and our husband comes from work and we're wearing a t-shirt that's stained, half ripped, smells like oil that we were frying fish in, it's really, really like a turnoff. Same thing goes for the husbands. If you're not taking showers on a regular basis, or you don't take care of your physical looks and you neglect yourself by gaining tons and tons of weight, that too is going to be a turn off for your wife. And sometimes we don't feel comfortable telling each other, hey, there's a little odor coming out, or you really don't look so attractive. You really are turning me off with your outfit. Because if we do say that, our partner is going to be offended. So we're going to suck it in, suck it in, suck it in, and then eventually that's going to cause us to be turned off by our spouse. And then by accident, we start looking elsewhere. And this becomes a very dangerous cycle. So just like when you were dating, you took care of yourself, you made time for each other, you went on dates with each other, just like when you came to the marriage part, you did all that, in order for it to stay solid, that also has to continue. Of course, there's other things like expectations. If you watch a movie and you see a man always holding the door for his wife, or you see this going on vacation 6 times a year, or buying very expensive gifts, it's all nice, it's all exciting, but that's an expectation that cannot always be met. So when you get married, or when you're married for many years, and your husband or wife was able to do things for you when you just got married, and it was nice because there were no kids, you had more time for each other, and you expect that kind of life to always continue, guess what? We have to lower those expectations, because with time, as we get older, we get weaker. We're not as strong. We have more responsibilities on our plates. Maybe you have a little baby and you're staying up all night. So you don't have the ability to, be there constantly when your husband comes for dinner and spend hours drinking and eating. That's beautiful. But with time, certain things change. And based on what aspect we are in our life, we have to change our expectations of what is required from us. Because let's say your wife is in school or your husband is in college and you're not able to cook dinner every night. You shouldn't expect that it's always the wife that has to cook or always the husband that has to take the garbage out. Sometimes, based on what we are in our life, whatever is happening in our life, we have to tweak and make changes. If she cannot cook dinner, why? Maybe she has a newborn. Maybe her work hours are very late. Maybe she's in college. Maybe it's time for me as a husband to pitch in and not expect that just because she's a woman, she's expected to always cook. Or think just because he's a man, he's always expected to take out the garbage, or he's always expected to bring home a certain amount of money. There is a season for everything. And we have to live our life based on the season, based on what am I up to in our marriage right now? Do I have little kids? Do I have big kids? Are my kids married? Those things will also be needed to tweak what's going on between you and your spouse, because if you don't tweak it based on that, you're going to start falling apart. And that's why you see marriages years later, they're married for 45 years. What happened? Why are they divorced? Weren't they married for that long? Because they didn't adjust to the changes. Their kids got married. The house is empty. It's just her and her husband. And now there's this empty nest syndrome of, what do we do with each other? What do we do with our time? We're not used to all this. And that's when arguments start and people get divorced many years later because they don't adjust to the current situation. So the number one thing about marriages, for them to stay healthy and for them to be long-lasting, is communication. I have to be able to communicate with my husband. My husband has to be able to communicate with me. Now, communication, there are 4 different types of communication. Whoever is watching, let's see if you can guess. What kind of communication is there? We have to be able to communicate in 4 different ways. We're going to go over those 4 different ways of communication. And if we study, again, from this book, 10 Minutes a Day to a Better Marriage, this first chapter, it's going to help us tremendously in our marriages. So let's see if anybody can guess. What is the first method of communication? All right. So while you're typing in your answers, I'm going to start. And maybe you guessed correctly. The first type of communication is being able to communicate negative feelings constructively, which means I am not pleased with something. I am upset or disappointed at my husband or at my wife for something. And I should be able to communicate that. If I don't communicate that, what's going to happen is I'm going to start holding it in, and then one day I'm going to just explode. It's like a pressure cooker. You have pressure, and then boom, there's like this explosion. Now, when you're going to communicate your negative feelings with your husband or wife, something made you upset. We have to be careful not to scream, not to yell, not to do it angrily, because if you're going to communicate something that you're upset about and you're going to do it in a very aggressive manner, your partner is going to close their ears. It's not going to be even processing. Why? Because if you're going to do it very angrily, screaming, yelling, upset, name calling, the partner is not going to listen to you. So it's very important to say what's bothering you, because you cannot always have a marriage which is always like compliments. Just like something is cold It's hot. Just like we have up days, we have down days. Just like we have all those opposites, just like we have to complement each other, we also have to tell each other when something is bothering us. So the first important step of communication is being able to tell your husband or wife when something is bothering you. Now, there was a very cute story that I'm going to share from this book, which I really thought was really pretty cool. It was cute, so I'm going to share it with you. There was a husband and wife, let's name him Chaim, and Chaim had a tendency, a habit, to always yell at his wife when things didn't go his way. And at the end, they always got upset at each other, and the wife went upset sleeping, and he went to sleep upset. So Chaim told himself, you know what? I'm not going to yell at my wife anymore. I'm going to hold it in. I'm going to try my best to control my temper. So Chaim is doing this for a few days. Every time his wife is getting under his skin, she's really irritating him. He's holding it in. He's not exploding. He's not name calling. He's not screaming. And this goes on for a few days, and Chaim keeps reminding himself, I'm not going to get angry. I'm not going to get angry. Finally, the day came and his wife really pissed him off. She really got under his skin and he couldn't handle it anymore. But he said, I'm not going to get angry, but I can't handle it anymore. So he went to the kitchen and he sees over there that there's a pot of spaghetti that's boiling on the stove. What does Chaim do? He's angry at his wife, but he told himself he's not going to explode. He takes the dishwashing soap and he spills it into the pot of boiling spaghetti and he walks out of the house. So he thinks he did a good job. He didn't yell at her. He didn't lose his temper, but he was able to release his frustration by taking that dishwashing soap and pouring it into the pot of boiling spaghetti. Little did he know that that was actually worse than yelling, and it costed him about a week of not talking to his wife and even bigger problems. So sometimes we think we have a fix, we have a solution to our problem. We're not going to yell, we're not going to scream, but we take our anger out a different way. And that too is not healthy. So if something is bothering you, it's very important to communicate that, to talk about it. Here are 4 different ways of talking about something negative with your husband and wife. Number 1, do not exaggerate. So when you're talking to your spouse and it's really bothering you how he doesn't clean up after he eats, or he doesn't put his socks when he's in the laundry, he doesn't pick it up and put it into the hamper, it's always on the floor when he's about to take a shower, or whatever it may be, right? Like he doesn't put the milk back into the refrigerator after he takes it out. If something is bothering you, don't exaggerate. Don't tell your husband or wife, you always forget to put the milk away. You never put your socks inside the hamper. Avoid using words like always, never, because that's going to be an exaggeration. And when somebody uses the words always and never, the partner doesn't want to hear it because they're like, always, never, that's not true. Boom, and they shut down. They don't even want to hear the rest of whatever you have to say. So number 1, when you're communicating something negative to your husband or wife, avoid using always, never. Don't exaggerate. Number 2, don't be a mind reader. Don't think you know what your husband or wife is thinking. Do you want to go to the party with me? Oh, I know you don't want to go to the party because you never like going to parties with me. You just read their mind. How do you know? Maybe you have enough experience to guess, and you may be 99% correct. But when you become a mind reader, you're actually causing more tension in your relationship. So don't read your husband or your wife's mind. Oh, I know you don't like chicken for dinner, so I made spaghetti instead. Well, maybe he doesn't like chicken for dinner, but don't assume. Ask, what would you like me to make for dinner? So don't read each other's minds. If you need something, you want your husband to take out the garbage, so you go upstairs and then you come back down and the garbage is not out and you get upset. I knew you're not going to take out the garbage because you assumed that he was supposed to know that you want him to take out the garbage. It's not necessarily like that. You want something to be done, you have to communicate it. You asked him to buy you tomatoes or cucumbers, and you also remembered you needed milk, but you want him to remember it. So when he comes home without the milk, why didn't you get milk? And then he says, but you only asked me for tomatoes and cucumbers. Well, you know we don't have milk in the house. True, maybe he knows, but some people don't think the way you think. So if you need something to be done and you don't want to get upset when it's not done, you need to communicate that and not be a mind reader. Number 3, when you say a statement, a sentence, don't use the word you in the beginning of the sentence. Use the word I instead. I think I have an example of that. Okay? Let's say you're upset and you're having an argument. If you start this argument, if you start this negative, let's say you're upset that your husband or your wife is always, I shouldn't say always because we don't want to do that, right? It's exaggeration, is putting you down next to your children. If you say, you put me down next to the kids, that you make me very upset. If you start your sentence with the word you, you're actually causing your husband and wife to like shut down. They don't want to hear what you have to say. But if you start the sentence with the word I, you have more of a chance of making your partner hear you out. Okay? For example, I feel I don't get recognized for all the work that I do is much better than saying you don't show me enough appreciation for everything. You see the difference? Saying I feel I don't get recognized for the work I do is better than saying you don't show me appreciation for whatever I do. So if you're having a conversation with your husband and wife, avoid starting a sentence with the word you. Because when you say, you don't buy me what I want, you don't listen to me, you don't help me, it makes yourself look like they have to defend themselves from you. So all of a sudden they become defensive. But if you say, I wish you helped me more with the children, I wish you remembered when it's my birthday and made me feel better by buying me a gift. When you say I, it's a much better way of communicating. Dr. Regina, what if you keep asking and they don't do what you ask? That's a good question. If you keep asking and they don't do what you want, sometimes you have to also understand your husband or your wife's capabilities. If you keep asking for the same thing over and over and over and over again and nothing is changing, it may very well be that this particular task is actually very difficult for them to undertake. It's one of those things where they say, like, pick your battles. Like, for example, if you constantly say, I want you to pick up your socks and put them in the hamper, I want you to pick up your clothes and put them in the laundry basket, and you keep saying it over and over and over and over, and they're not changing, it may very well be that that particular task is just something their brain is not processing. You may have to, unfortunately, and this is just my opinion, forget about that, do that yourself, and then move on to something else. Maybe work on taking out the garbage or work on cleaning the table, because certain things are just not worth fighting over. And if it's a different thing and the husband or wife is not getting it, you may need to have a difference in communication. Maybe you have to go out for dinner in a restaurant, and when you're in a good mood, talk about it more, read books about it more. Maybe you don't communicate how those things really make you feel, and your husband doesn't even know that it's bothering you. So it's a very long process, but very worthwhile. And the last part about how do we communicate negative feelings to each other? Do not generalize, okay? So if your husband, I'm going to say husband because I'm talking from a lady's perspective, but let's change it. If your wife is late to a party, she has to go to a party, and she's late. Arson, you're so funny. Thank you. And she's late. And she's notorious for being late. Instead of saying, why are you always late to parties? I can't take it anymore. Every time we go to a party, you're late. You're generalizing. Your wife is closing her ears. She's not even listening to you anymore because she knows you're upset. Rather than generalizing, say, you know how much I wanted to go to this party. It would have made me feel so much better if you're more careful and manage your time more efficiently the next time we have to go somewhere. Don't make general statements because your husband or your wife, they're not even gonna listen to you. You wanna get your message across? Talk about today's situation, right now what's happening. Figure that part out. Next time when you're in a better mood, then you're going to generalize and say, you know, I've noticed we have this problem. Let's figure out how we can avoid it in the future. So number one communication tip is be able to express negative feelings constructively. Number two, very important in communication and marriage, is accept the negative feeling, okay, without being defensive. So it's very, very easy for us to say to somebody what they're doing wrong. So we just spoke about how do we tell somebody what they're doing wrong. How about number two? Accept what somebody's telling you without getting offended. So if your husband is telling you something that's bothering them, or if your wife is telling you something that's bothering them, hear them out. Don't get all defensive. Don't start acting like a lawyer, trying to figure it out and trying to bring in all your proofs and everything. Listen to what your husband or your wife is telling you. They're upset about something. Validate their feelings. They're upset. When you start to defend yourself right away, what you're doing is you're showing your partner that their feelings are not important. It doesn't matter that they're upset. What matters right now is that you are right for what you did and they misjudged you. You may 100% be right for what you did. You may have nothing wrong and maybe he did misjudge you or she did misjudge you. That's not important right now. What's important right now, in the second very important aspect of communication, is validate them. Your husband is upset about something. Your wife is upset about something. Acknowledge that they are upset. Start by saying, I know you're upset. I'm sorry. Or if you're not good at saying sorry, I know you're upset, but I didn't mean to hurt you. First, just cool off the situation. One of you is really upset. You're going to figure this out later. It's very important to just take ownership and let the situation be cooled off. Once you cool off the situation and both of you are able to calm down, tomorrow or a few hours later, you can get back and explain yourself and defend yourself and say, by the way, when you yelled at me a couple of hours earlier or yesterday or a week ago, I didn't say anything to you, but you know, that really hurt me because. So you're going to find a way to justify whatever it is you have to say later, but don't do it at the time your husband or wife are sharing with you what's hurting them, what's frustrating them. Because if you do it at that time, it's going to make the situation even worse. So accept what's being told to you. Acknowledge that maybe you understand why your husband or wife is upset. And then you're going to move on and fix that problem, and then you'll settle it later. I see that in the comments here, my husband is having fun. I train her well. Okay, good to know. Let's see what other comments we have. Asya, if you're acting like a lawyer in relationships, you'll always lose the case. Well, there are some very good lawyers, Asya, that don't lose the case. And we can, especially the ones who know how to talk, we can definitely stand our ground and prove our point and you know, come out of it pretty innocent, 100%. But in every marriage, there is one husband or wife that can talk and defend themselves, and they're the talker in a marriage, right? Like, they know how to talk. They know how to prove themselves. And then you have the other partner who's just as smart, but their verbal skills of defense, they're not as sharpened. So they just don't know how to speak up for themselves. So what happens? At the end, those poor people who are the quiet ones that don't know how to put their words together, they're always getting suppressed by the ones that do know how to stand up for themselves. And that's why if you want your husband or wife not to feel crushed every time you have a disagreement, let them just give in. Just give in so that you're not constantly crushing each other. All right, let me see here. Arthur Rubinov. There are too many advisors that get involved. There's no more or very little that live for yourself and your other half. Now it's living to impress not yourself but others. 100% Arthur, I actually agree with that. What Arthur, I think, is saying is that many times we are not living according to our own standards and whatever we think is normal for us, but we're living for the standards of society. We want society to accept us, right? We want society to think we're living our marriages the way that society has built for us. If, for example, I don't know if that's what Arthur was using, but I'm going to give my own example. If, for example, we're very happy living in a 2-bedroom apartment and that makes us happy, that's what we want to do. We now have to meet society's expectations. We have to buy a house. So what's going to happen? We're going to get into debt. We're going to live miserable lives because we're working 24 hours because we don't make so much money, just because we have to fit in, we have to be accepted. And then what happens? We have financial struggle, and then we're constantly fighting with each other because husband is exhausted, wife is exhausted that husband is never home, all because we wanted to live according to what society thinks is normal for us in 2022, and then our marriages just break apart. Or we get married and we don't have money to go on vacations because we don't make that much money. But if you want to prove that you're successful like all your friends are, you're going to have to also join these expensive, extravagant, lavish vacations in the process of getting into debt or being financially very tight. Because if you don't, what are people going to think about you? So you end up going into that financial stress and causing tension between each other. And then we have arson. Another important point to remember, if you want to always be right, you will eventually end up alone. That's a good point, okay? So he says, if you want to stay married, give in that you're wrong. Because if you're always going to prove your point that you are right, it's going to lead to separation and, God forbid, divorce. Number 3, we have 4 different ways of important communication. So the first one is being able to say when something is bothering us. The second one is accepting when somebody criticizes us or is upset at us without being defensive and shutting them down. And number 3 is expressing positive feelings. Very, very, very important. Learn how to compliment each other. Learn how to tell each other how much you love them, how much they mean to you, how your life wouldn't be the same without each other. We are living in a society from young age where our teachers give us more criticism than praise, where our parents will give us more punishment than reward for our actions. And what happens? We become conditioned to pointing out somebody's negative traits and criticizing them faster than complimenting them. And as we get older, those conditions that we are so used to become a part of us, and it affects our marriages. It's like going to the bank. If you're constantly depositing money and then sometimes pulling money out, your bank account is active. It's in good standing. But if you are not depositing money into your bank and you are just withdrawing, you're going to be a negative balance and your bank account is eventually going to close. Same thing in a marriage. If you're always negatively talking to each other, always criticizing each other and not complimenting each other, your husband and wife eventually is going to put deaf ears. They're not going to hear you. But if you're complimenting, I love how you cook dinner, or you look so amazing, the house is so beautiful, thank you for the way you're taking care of the children, they're coming out to be so wonderful, and you're complimenting all the time, okay, as often as you possibly can. When something is bothering you and you do have to give a criticism and you do have to tell each other why something hurt you, your spouse is going to be more than willing to listen to you. Why? Because they hear that you're always so full of positivity and so full of giving them compliments that when you talk about something negative, they're like, oh my God, what happened? It's something unusual. So we all have to train ourselves to compliment each other more, to notice the good in each other, not to look at other people and say, oh, look at her husband, look at his wife, look at the way she talks to him, look at the way he talks to his wife. He's like the boss of the house and I feel like I'm a mop. Don't compare yourselves to other people, because the personalities that you and your wife share are not the same personalities as your husband, as another couple. And not only that, some people will say, what is this? If I'm going to compliment her, if I'm going to compliment him, she's going to go on my head, like she's going to become too egotistic. I don't need this. That's old-fashioned mentality. If you compliment each other, it doesn't mean the person is going to sit on your head, because you have to do it to each other. It's not a one-way street where only one person is supposed to compliment and the other person never has to give a compliment. In that case, yeah, you're going to lose. It's going to be like a one-way street. But when you both compliment each other all the time, you're not going to sit on their head, because you're both doing it to each other. So we have to get out of that mindset where complimenting the husband or wife is not a good thing, because it's going to make them too, like big shots. It's not true when it's done properly and the person who's receiving it knows how to humbly receive it, become humble with it, then it has a very tremendous reward to your marital system. And the rewards are amazing. It's going to long-lasting marriages happen from that. And number 4, the fourth one, that's final one, is when somebody is complimenting you, learn to accept the compliment. Right, Marina? Bolomero. Exactly. Learn to accept the compliment. If your husband gave you a compliment and said, wow, you look so good today in that dress, I love it, beautiful, don't be like, nah, I don't like it, my stomach is popping out, it's too tight, it's too short. You got a compliment, learn to accept that compliment. Because if you don't accept it, you're not acknowledging that you're worth it. And if, for example, your husband brought you flowers, sometimes we say, don't buy me flowers. It's a waste of money. Don't do it, because they die in 3 days anyways. And then what happens? You go to your friend, or months pass, and your husband doesn't buy you flowers anymore because you told him you don't need it. It dies anyways. And then we say, oh my God, how come he stopped buying me flowers? I want flowers and he doesn't buy it. I wish he bought me flowers. And then you get upset and you tell your husband, well, why did you stop buying me flowers? And he says, well, because you told me not to. And then you're like, yeah, so what? I didn't think you were going to listen. No, they're going to listen. So when something good is being done, don't suppress it. Your husband bought you a gift, or your wife bought you a gift, even if it's not the gift that you wanted. Don't suppress it and make them feel bad about it, because what's going to happen is you're going to make them fearful of doing that for you again in the future, because instead of making you feel good about their choice, they feel bad that they didn't make you happy. They didn't please you the way they wanted. So when somebody's complimenting you or doing something good for you, learn to accept that and learn to compliment and learn to communicate how much you love what they did for you. Lack of patience is what causes divorces, in my opinion, or at least a big factor. Yes, Benjamin, I totally agree. We have to learn to compromise. We have to learn to be patient. There's like, listen, there's books and books. We have this book, right? And then we have, let's see, we have this book. We have a few books, but this book, for example, What You Need to Know About Marriage. And there's hundreds and hundreds of other books, all dedicated to marriages. So of course, a video that I'm making right now, a live that I'm making right now, is not going to be an answer to all marriage related questions, but it is definitely a start. Because like I said in the beginning, we have to make time for each other. We are living in a society where we're running around, we're busy, we are extremely addicted to our phones. So we don't come make time, we don't go on dates. Number two, that leads to lack of communication. We think we are mind readers, or our spouse is a mind reader, and instead of telling them, communicating how and what we want, we are wanting them to figure it out. We think that it's always about compliments. It's not always about compliments. If something is bothering you, you have to communicate that. Because if you don't communicate it, one day you're going to explode and one day you're going to pressure off. So learn how to say negative things that are inside of you, just like you say positive things. And when you do get the negative comments, learn to accept it. Respect the in-laws family. I say that's very important as well. So I do agree with that. I think it's an extra very, very good point that in a good, healthy marriage, respecting your in-laws is definitely a very, very big key factor. Marina says, I should be a marriage counselor. Thank you so much. I'm not that smart. It's all from the books. I'm just, took notes and just presenting it to you. But I appreciate the compliment. The in-laws. Now about the in-laws, definitely respecting the in-laws, because they say if you are good with your mother-in-law, it also is a very big factor in having a good relationship with your husband or your wife. But, we have to put a disclaimer here. If your in-laws are toxic or negative or can be interfering with the marriages, because that happens also. We have to be devil's advocate. We have to talk for all circumstances. There are situations in which the in-laws is very, causes a lot of problems in marriages. How do you still respect them? You respect them by forming a boundary. You don't argue. You don't fight. You don't have to, be disrespectful in which you are ignoring them. You see them, you say hello, you say goodbye, you pick up the phone if they call, but you have your boundaries in order to keep your marriage at peace. That also is a very important thing to keep in mind. Thank you, Asa. You're so sweet. So that is all for tonight. And I think we covered a very big topic today about communication and how important it is between a husband and wife. Not sure how long this live was. I believe it's probably over a half an hour, but I saw a few people wanted to join my live. And I'm not sure if you still want to join my live, please request to join, and maybe for the next couple of minutes, we are going to get you onto this live and see what you have to say. Because today, when I posted a question about why marriages are failing, we actually got, hi Sergey, how are you? Thanks for joining. We actually had a lot of answers of why people's marriages fail. And actually, Arthur Rubinov made a video with his answer, and he was actually in a video form. He spoke about why he thinks marriages fail, and I thought that was really cool. It was too long to type, so he made a little short clip, and I really enjoyed watching it and hearing his opinion and perspective. So once again, if you want to join, before I click out, request to join again, because I know a few people in the beginning kept on pressing that they want to join the live. So if you're still wanting to join the live, request to join, and maybe I will accept you and have you join this conversation. Otherwise, I really... Oh, hi, Milana. Milana is on. Milana, you are amazing. Just saw Milana recently at an event. I once again, always appreciate everyone's comments and feedbacks. When I post a question on my page, I actually do it for one reason. I do it because I think the interaction that we have when we're able to share our opinions on a platform is very important, because you get to see that there's more than one way of thinking. It's not just, we're made out of a world with hundreds and thousands and millions of people. And all those millions of people think a certain way. That's why when there's a question that's being posted and people get a chance to answer that question, everyone who reads it will start thinking like, oh, I didn't think of it like that. Oh, that's a really good point. That's why when you answer the questions, I think it's very, very helpful for everyone else, because you are all very smart, intelligent people, and you should never hold back from commenting, because there are some people who are very shy and they don't want to comment on social media because they feel like everybody's going to read their comment, and what if I said something wrong? Okay, so what if you didn't say something that 50 people will agree to? Another 50 people will agree to it. And you know what? A person has to be true to their own belief system. If you are very much true to yourself and to what you believe, you're never going to be afraid to speak up, because you're really true to what you believe. But if your mindset is very shaky and you're not really sure, then you're going to be hesitating in, speaking up and sharing your opinion with other people. So I see that few people are asking for Avi to join the live. I don't think Avi is going to be able to join us tonight, but we will definitely, with God's help, have another episode where Avi is going to join us. Actually, Sergey, you're on. You want to join us? If you want to join the live, request to join, and maybe we will be able to have you in for a few minutes. So if Sergey Rafaeli, if you want to join the live, since I know you're watching and you're a pro at doing lives, because I watch them a lot, and your cooking is definitely amazing and entertaining, you can definitely join. Otherwise, I know it's getting late and I will log off. Let's see, is there anything else that we missed? No, I think we covered pretty much everything. So since he's not asking to join, I guess he doesn't want to join tonight, and that's totally cool. Maybe busy with other things. We are going to hop off right now, and I appreciate everybody who was watching tonight and who participated, who commented. If you find this video to be helpful, please share it with others. Please put your comments, feedbacks. If you have any other topic ideas, please write to me and I will try to address it next time. Have a good night. Bye, Olga. Bye, everyone. See you next time.